Hello and welcome back to Belstead Lane. This is the first instalment of the new layout build on YouTube since its debut around 6 months ago. I do apologise for the long gap in videos once again. I did have to step away from the hobby for a brief period for reasons I won't explain, but I did end up coming back and carrying on from where I left off and finally got this fiddle yard completed. It certainly took a long time and a lot of man hours because of how big it is. Just as a reminder, it does span the entire length of the shed, which is 19 foot long, and plus there's some extra room on the corners as well. So all that together means it takes up a hell of a lot of track. Most of it is brand new, but I did manage to reuse as much as I can from the old layout as well. But because of how small that was, it really didn't go a long way at all. But on camera now, you do get the gist of how big it is, and I've also positioned a couple of Dapple spine wagons in view as well, just to give a bit of reference. So it certainly is a bit of a beast. Pretty much all of the track on this fiddle yard is Pico Code 100 with a few pieces of Hornby track here and there. But again, it is all pretty much brand new, and all the tracks were prepared with their dropper wires before laying, and it's all pinned down using track pins. So as you can see, the straights go on for the entire length of the shed, apart from a couple of points here and there, but I'll get to those in a moment. But if I just follow it to the other side of the room, as you can see, there is plenty of storage overall. All the point work for the fiddle yard is positioned right in the end, so the scenic section will be there, or the tracks will enter from the scenic section there, and then all the point work is at the beginning of the fiddle yard, and then it curves before straightening up and then crossing the lift out section and then doing the same on the other side over there. All the points on the layout are Pico streamline points, and they're a mix of medium radius and short radius. And I've also got a Y point there as well, plus a few curved points just to save some space and improve the running as much as I can. And all the points, like the track, were prepared before laying, so they also have their dropper wires, frog wires, and I've also drilled out the holes for the point motors, if you can see that there. The same applies on this side of the fiddle yard as well, so everything is pretty much a mirror of each other. So I've also got a Y point there as well, and as you can see, going from 2 tracks into around 11 lines, I think it is, certainly does require a lot of point work. So with the bends, I use the Tracksetta Tools to help lay these, and they really did make it easier. The tightest one is 4th radius, so they're kept nice and gentle and streamlined, so all the trains should have no problems running around this fiddle yard, and I'm hoping to enable coast coupling on most of my stock once I get around to getting it. But what I did have to do with the straights is, I don't know if you can see very well or make it out, but I did have to curve them out a little bit towards the edges of the baseboard in order to get enough room for the curves. So I didn't quite get enough room to do what I originally wanted with this fiddle yard. So I did have to change it ever so slightly to the plan, but overall I'm really happy with it still. So the fiddle yard is made up of 13 lines. So we have a point here, and then these 2 lines are the short sidings. So the shorter examples of freight trains will be occupying these lines, such as the railhead treatment train and flask trains, and you can also fit a DMU and an EMU in there as well. These 2 lines are the down long freight sidings, so these will be occupied by the longer examples of freight trains, like the stone trains and container trains, for example. And then we have 5 lines in the middle, which are the passenger lines, and these are bi-directional, and these are occupied by the Class 90, Mark 3s, Class 86s and Mark 2s, basically all the passenger trains that are in fixed sets. And the idea is, with the point work at the beginning of the fiddle yard, I've used the Y point and the relevant crossovers so they can enter the fiddle yard on the correct line, and then they can run out in reverse and then cross over onto the correct running line before exiting the fiddle yard onto the scenic section. So it just becomes a lot more easier to operate rather than having to switch tracks all the time. And then finally, these 3 tracks at the end, so these 3, they're the long sidings for the up line. So again, they'll be occupied by the longer freight trains again. I did originally want another pair of short sidings on this side, but they wouldn't fit, so I had to sacrifice that and have an extra long freight siding instead. But I'm not worried by that. So with the lift out section, it was a slide out section previously when it was in the debut video, but I did revert it back to a lift out because I found I did have more room than I originally anticipated. So I've just reinstated the sliding bolt racks, added a couple more, and that is now absolutely solid. There's no movement in that whatsoever. So really pleased with that. And I used the DCC Concepts or Legacy Models solder padded sleepers at the ends, and also to the relevant neighbouring tracks as well, just so everything's kept well aligned. And I've done the same this side as well. It's vital when you have lift out sections or stuff like that, that you use something to anchor the tracks in position so they don't move, and you get it locked in the same position each and every time. And I've ran the wagons over these plenty of times, and I'm confident that there will be no derailments. And again, they also had their dropper wires fitted. People are going to probably ask me how I'm going to power this, but I do know how I'm going to do it. But I'm going to keep this that for a future video. So I'm going to hand it back to myself now, to a few months ago when I was around halfway through this field yard build, and it was towards the end of summer, so I was a lot healthier back then and wasn't recovering from a rather nasty cold. I do apologise for my voice in the last few clips. My voice has pretty much only just come back. So without further ado, I'll hand it back to myself when I was around halfway through the build, and I hope you enjoy the video. So you join me now, and I'm roughly halfway through the fiddle yard build, and I'm just up to the lift out section. I've only got one more track to lay on this, and I'll be getting on with that in a moment. I'll just quickly show how I've got on so far. All of the track on this side of the layout has been laid, and I wanted to get this out of the way first just to see what sort of room or plan I could do. And in the end, I settled for this, and I am really happy with it, despite it not quite being what I was originally going to do. And all the track have had their dropper wires added before being laid. Same goes to the points. So all the points have had their dropper wires fitted, as well as the holes drilled for point motors and the frog wires, etc. I did add this little corner extension just so I could bring the curves in a bit earlier, especially these inside ones. So if I come a bit closer, you'll be able to see the join lines in the cork there. So you can make out where the edges of the baseboards were previously. But doing that little extension has meant that I can start the curves off a little bit earlier, bring these inwards more, and then join up to the relevant pieces of point work there. I also use the relevant pieces of rolling stock to test the clearances when laying these curves. So when using the freight lines, for example, I use the container wagons just to test the clearances, as these are quite long wagons, and the clearances on curves are obviously really important. But as things stand now, I am just about to finish this lift out section. At the ends of each track on the join for this, I have used the DCC Concepts or Legacy Models solder padded sleepers. So they're just sleepers with some solder pads on them, and these will help with alignment and keep everything all in one place. So I'll be adding those on the other side as well, which I will do once I've added in this last track. So the first thing I'll do is add this final piece of track in, and then I can just show you about how I prep the track and how I go ahead and lay it. And then once that's all laid, I can then add the soldered sleepers to these pieces of tracks and then trim them down. And then once those are in and I'm happy, I can then move on to continuing the fiddle yard this way. So first of all, I just need to prep that last piece of track for the slide out. So in front of me now is a piece of Pico Code 100 Flexi track, and I've already removed the relevant sleepers. So I've cut off a couple at the end, a couple in the middle, and then a couple, so I'll say a couple, I've cut about 4 off at the end there, as I will be needing to trim these down as the lift out section is just under 3 foot long. So the next stage is I'm going to tin the undersides of these, ready to accept solder. So I'll be tinning all of these in place, and then the solder sleepers will get soldered onto there, dropper wires there, and then another soldered sleeper there. I've got a scrap piece of wood here just so I don't burn the cork underneath.
And I'm just going to grab my soldering iron, make sure it's nice and prepared. Got the solder on the tip, and now I'm just going to heat up the rail. And then wait a few seconds, and then you'll start to see the solder get applied to the rail like so. And I'll just drag it around just to spread it, and then the same on the other side. As you are working with heat, obviously just bear in mind, don't burn yourself, wear PPE if you wish, and obviously don't breathe in the fumes as well, especially if you're using leaded solder, as they say. So that has now been tinned, ready to accept solder. So I'm going to go ahead now and do the same thing in the middle and at the other end. So I've tinned where I want my dropper wires, and I've also added some solder where I'm going to add the soldered sleepers. So now I need to prepare the dropper wires to get soldered in place now. So I've cut and stripped what I'm going to use as the dropper wires, and the stuff I use is this, made by Rapid, and as you can see I'm just about to run out, but I do have some more of this stuff coming. But now I'm just going to tin these wires and then solder them to the track. Tinning the wires is pretty much similar to the rails, so I've put them in the vise, so anything like a vise or some claws or whatever they're called will come in very handy for this. So you just apply the tip of the soldering iron and then add your solder, and easy as that. As you can see, you do get quite a lot of fumes, so work in a well ventilated area and don't breathe it in. So those wires are now tinned, so they can now be soldered directly to the track. So with the wires now tinned and the track tinned, I'm ready to solder the dropper wires to the track. So I'm going to add this wire onto this rail and then just apply the heat there. There we go. So that is now on there, and then I'll do the same this side. Obviously make sure you get the wire onto the correct rail. You want positive and negative, and of course I've used colour coded wire, so red for positive and black for negative. So that's on there now, and they're nice and secure. So this track is now ready to be fully fitted. So this track is now ready to be installed, and I will stress that this isn't the best way or most ideal way of covering baseboard joins or joins in the track where you need to separate them. But this is just how I've done it, and it's worked for me. And also because of the size of the slide out section, using a complete long length of flexi track seemed quite convenient. But what I do is I get my Tracksetta straight template, and I'm going to wedge that in the track. That's already been laid and in position. So with the Tracksetta tool in place, you can pretty much see that the rails are bang on level with each other. So this is the sort of thing the Tracksetta tool is quite useful for. So what I'm going to do is drill a couple of holes in the slots for the Tracksetta to mark where some track pins will go. This will initially set it in place, but then it will also provide its positioning for where the rails will be on the soldered sleeper. So with this in position, I'm going to drill in a couple of track pin holes. So one there and one over here somewhere, like so. So that is now marked roughly its initial position. And I've got my pack of track pins, and I'm using the Pico track pins, as these are thinner and longer and a bit easier to work with than the Hormy ones, but they are really fragile and easy to bend. So I'm going to get a track pin, slot it in the sleeper like so, push it through the cork, and with my track pin hammer, lightly tap it in about halfway just to anchor it in place. Same on this one. And now I'm going to remove this Tracksetta as gently as I can. So with that now removed, I can hammer these pins home. So with those few track pins in, as you can see, the track is already quite well aligned, but I will just add the soldered fish plates in anyway, just to really anchor it in position. So I'm going to go ahead and add those now. And these are the solder pad sleepers, which are from Legacy Models or DCC Concepts, and they come in quite a large pack. They're also on a sprue, so you will need to cut them out, but I will drill a couple of holes in them and get them ready for installation. So I've got my sleeper prepared, and I've already drilled a track pin hole in it, as you can see. So I will now slide that underneath, ready to be soldered to the track. So that goes on like so, pretty much there. And I've got another track pin, so I'll slot that through the cork again. And then I'm going to just hold the sleeper either side whilst I tap it. So with that sleeper now installed, I'm just going to check to make sure it's not moving. So that is now pretty solid. The solder's directly on those pads already, so they're now ready to be fitted. So I'm now going to apply the heat to the outside of the rail on each side. And there we go. You'll see that the solder will flow under the rail onto the other side there, so that's how you know you've got a successful bond. And I'll now do the same the other side. And there we go. So I'm now just double checking I'm happy with the track's positioning. I've made sure I've left plenty enough gap between the rails, as this is a lift out section, so I didn't want any snagging. I've left about a 3mm gap there. So the next stage is to just check it's all level and aligned properly. So I've got a steel ruler, and I'm just going to place that on top of the rails, and as you can see, those are nice and level, pretty much bang on. And then the same the other side, so those are pretty much level as well. I do apologise for the slightly shaky camera work, but this is quite difficult to film. But as you can see, those joints are pretty much bang on, so I'm happy with that. So just taking a quick look at these sleepers, as you can see, they are slightly thinner than the standard sleepers on the Pico track. And if you can see as well, the solder does raise in order to make contact between the solder pad and the rail. You can also add some plastic strip underneath the sleepers if you wanted to, and I did try that, but I did find that the solder raising against the rails is just good enough. It's fine. I haven't had any problems with it being disconnected. So I've got a wagon here, one of my Dapol container wagons. I like to use these because the bogies are exposed, so you can look at it from above just to check for any kinks due to the track not being quite lined up. So you get a slight clickety-clack, which is quite nice depending on the type of person you are. But looking at that, I don't know how well it's picking it up on camera, but there's absolutely no movement in that bogie at all, which is what you want. So it's a very nice, smooth transition between the two tracks. I have my soldering iron set to 350 degrees. I found this a pretty decent temperature, so it doesn't take a long time to heat up the track or the wires, etc. And it also gives you plenty of time to do what you need to do, so you don't risk melting off the adhesive on these sleepers, as I did have to redo some of them. I did have to replace the sleepers, hence why this track looks a bit worse for wear. So yeah, just make sure your soldering iron's set for a decent temperature. Whether 350 degrees is too high or not still, I don't know. But I found it worked for me all right and gave me plenty of time. So just a word of caution there. Now that I'm happy with the initial track join, I can get the rest of this track laid in place. And then once it's all in place, I will solder the end sleepers to all of those at the end there, and then trim the rails down once I've done it. So that's all the end sleepers now installed and soldered in position. And then I went over them with a damp cloth just to wipe off any excess flux. And then I just gave it a bit of a wiggle with my fingers just to make sure it was all, just to make sure that everything was nice and secure. Obviously do it when the track's cool enough so you don't burn your fingers. So I've already marked where I want to cut the rails with a marker pen roughly. So I'm just going to get the Dremel out now and slice these down. So I've got my Dremel and I'll be using the extension attachment with the cutting disc. And I'm now just going to slice through those rails. Makes a nice, neat and quick job of it. Most important thing is to hold it so it's level with the track so you get a nice straight cut. So here goes nothing. So that was a nice result. So I've just cut that just shy of the baseboard join, and as you can see, a nice straight cut. So I'm now going to just do the rest of them. Okay, so I made a bit more progress. So I did carry on laying some more straight tracks and also laid another point there just to mimic what I've done on that side. So this side of the fiddle yard is going to be a mirror of that side. But as you can see, it's starting to really come together now. So I'm really pleased with the progress. So we're now reaching the other side of the fiddle yard before we have to do all the bends. But as you can see, all the soldered sleepers are in now just to help with all the alignment. And I checked with a steel ruler and a wagon just to check the height of the rails was all the same along with all the alignment. So nice and smooth running now. I also rejigged a few pieces of track on this side of the layout as well because I wasn't quite happy with the gaps in the track. Wasn't difficult to do, it was just a matter of bringing up a track pin or two and then just wiggling the flexi track just to get it into the right shape and position. Didn't take too long, and it was only like 2 or 3 tracks that needed sorting out anyway. But same story here, the tracks are now a little bit closer, which will allow for much smoother operation. So my attention now turns to the point work at the entrance to the fiddle yard, and I will be starting to lay some of the point work. So as you can see, you've got a variety of points here. Most of it is new, and then of course I've got some of the points from the previous layout as well, all ready to be laid already. But I'll just go ahead and just show you how I wire them up. So the first point I've wired up is this Pico left-hand medium radius point, and it is an electrofrog point, as are the rest of the points on the layout. So if I just flip this over, I'll just explain what I've done. I've soldered a red wire to these 2 rails, which will lead to the power or the DCC bus, and I've done the same with a black wire on this side. So these 2 are constantly powered up. And what I've also done is I've snipped the 2 wires here, and this separates the frog from this rail. So now this wire, the green wire, which I've soldered onto the frog wire, this will be connected to a frog juicer at some point. So the frog is individually powered to the rest of the point. And doing this just means that it increases its reliability. So with these rails joined, you're no longer relying on the contact between the switch blades and the rails. So no matter how dirty or whatever these get, you should always get power. Doing this doesn't take long at all once you know what you're doing. I didn't really have the time to go in depth about it, but there are plenty of how-tos on YouTube on how to fully wire up points from start to finish. And also the packs the points all come with the relevant instructions and things. So just refer to those or watch other videos. But now this point is now ready to be installed, and I'll get carried on with wiring up some more. So that's a few more points now ready to be fitted to the layout, and one of these points is a 3-way point. So these are wired up a little bit differently. So all I've done is a single dropper wire onto a single rail. You don't need to join rails as far as I'm aware on these. And also I've left the frog wires without a wire attached because of how silly long they are. I don't know if you can see that on camera, but they do like to leave the frog wires really long on these. So what I'll do is I'll just drill a hole in the baseboard and wire these up underneath as and when I fit a frog juicer to them. But these are now ready to get laid onto the layout, which is what I'll do now.
So I've installed the first series of point work on this side of the fiddle yard at the entrance, and as I went, before I pinned everything down, I drilled the holes for the dropper wires and the frog wires, and also drilled the holes for the point motors as well, so for when I go down the undermount point motor route. So I've done that by having masking tape on either side, and then just drill in the middle of them using a 2mm drill bit, and then using a 10mm drill bit, I think it was, drilling halfway down and then doing the other half from underneath, and there is a good reason why I done that.
So here's an example of a hole for a point motor, and the reason why I go halfway from the top and from the bottom is so you don't end up ruining the wood, particularly on this side of the baseboard. So as you can see, there's no it looks really clean around there, so there's no split wood chippings or anything like that. Whereas if you go all the way through, then you will risk taking some of the wood with you. And I also do it halfway from each side because you spend less time underneath the baseboard, which we all know is very uncomfortable at the best of times. So that's the reason why I do that.
And also not forgetting the insulated fish plates as well in the correct places. Can be difficult to explain. Anywhere where you know that the polarity of the rails will be changing and you need them to be separated to avoid shorts, that is basically where you put them. But yeah, again, just refer to instructions. So I've gone ahead and I've laid the first two curves on this side of the fiddle yard, and those join up to form the short sidings on this side. So those have now been completed, and I've also gone ahead and laid in another point. So there we have a short radius right hand point, and I've already prepared the next track to be laid. So I've added the dropper wires to it and some new fish plates, and that will get joined up onto this track here. So what I'll do now is just show how I use the track setters to help form the curves, because they do help a lot, and this might come in handy if you're like me and you do struggle a little bit with the curves. So I've already slotted in the new piece of track into the straight, and I've got my couple of pairs of dapole container wagons here, and I just use these just to check the clearances. So with these wagons here, I'm just going to have a very quick little play just to check for the clearances, so then the wagons don't collide on the corners. Right, so I'm happy with that. So I'm going to get this track pinned in position first, just to start off this initial corner. So with these first few track pins in, I can now focus on getting the curvature right. So here is a 5th radius Tracksetta tool, and I use this to lay this inside track. So I'm going to use this just to test out the initial curvature.
So as you can see, that's a bit too tight. So what we need is the 6th radius. So here's the 6th radius Tracksetta tool. So I'm going to just wedge that in there like that, and that will keep the track nice and well within the radius throughout the bend. So the track pin I previously added was here, so I'm going to add just a few around this corner. And I'll put that just where the previous hole was, just so it maintains 6th radius all the way around. So that's another track pin in. And just keep doing it until you do the entire curve. But if you need or want the radius just to get a bit tighter, then use your other Tracksetta gauges, just so then it brings the curve round a little bit tighter if you need it. So I've just added the 5th radius in just so it stays a bit closer to the running lines on this side. There we go. And then same up there like that. So I've left the end of this loose for now, but I use the 6th and 5th radius just to get this bend nice and smooth, and so it maintains a similar distance to the tracks throughout the curve. But as you can see, you always get one rail ending up a bit longer than the other, just where it's got to compensate for the bend on one side. So whenever you bend flexi track, either rail will end up being longer or shorter than another. But what I do is I just get the Dremel and trim it down afterwards once I'm happy. So I'm just going to do that, and then I'm going to connect this last piece of track in just so it joins to the point, and then I'll carry on from there.
So that's another pair of curves in, and they make up the long sidings on the down line. So they continue across the lift out section and then to the other set of points on the other side of the fiddle yard. And I've done a little test and found that I can fit a loco and 18 wagons on it. So that's a very nice result, considering that the other side of the fiddle yard will be able to hold even more. So track laying is very repetitive stuff, so I hope you get the gist of how I lay the curves and the straights. As I said, the Tracksetta templates really are helpful and lifesavers when it comes to track laying. They've really made this so much easier. So I did have to use a 4th radius jig on this outer curve just to get it to meet up with the point, so it doesn't go all dodgy when it joins the point itself. But 4th radius is still a nice radius to have, so I'm not worried too much. So what I'm going to do now is do one last big montage of me completely finishing off this fiddle yard, and then I'll round the video up there because it's already really long as it is. So if you stuck it out this long, then I do appreciate that. But yeah, I'll get back to you once I've completed the rest of this fiddle yard and covered most of this cork, and obviously had a good tidy up. Oh, wow, finally finished. So all the bends on this side of the fiddle yard are now all in position, as are all the points. So again, they've all been fitted with their dropper wires before laying, and holes drilled with point motors and all the rest of it. So these shouldn't have to come up again now, neither should any of the other tracks. And then just to tidy things up, I added some dummy sleepers underneath, just chamfered off the plastic rail chairs and just slid them under. It just tidies everything up a bit and makes it a bit more presentable. Done the same over here as well, so just added in some dummy sleepers just to tidy it up again, because this side was looking a little bit worse than the other side with missing sleepers. But I've just tidied that up now as best as I could, so happy with everything now. And there we have it. So the Fiddle yard is now fully completed and I can move on. So I'm not going to wire it all up just yet. I'm going to wait until I've got the whole circuit completed. But that's a little while away yet, because I've still got to build all the track base up and decide what I can do on the scenic section. What I definitely do need to do though is add some fascias to these boards, just to give the Fiddle yard a bit of protection, stop trains falling off and stop the trains being hit when the pull table's in use. But right now it can't be. I've kind of using it as a storage pile, if you like. But I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Follow my other social medias as well, because I do post on there a lot more regularly, so you can keep up to date with the layout that way as well. I'll leave links to all my social medias and my RMWeb thread in the description as always. So I hope to see you in the next video, guys. But until then, take care and happy modelling. Bye.